Where's Creed? Creed?
Here.
Quality assurance. Your job. I really think you screwed the pooch on this one, Creed. Because of you, the entire company is in jeopardy.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. And normally, I like to have a conversation with one guest here and there, and then we'll do the big conversations for the comics aficionados. But today, I'm blessed. I have two guests. We're going to talk about something very interesting, at least to me. Yul Carter from Fantastic Comics. How you doing, buddy?
I'm wonderful.
We also have Perch from Comics by Perch. How you doing?
I'm wonderful, too. Good to be on.
So today we're going to talk about some of the most dumbfounding, ridiculous decisions that really, in the end, you can't even justify when it's all said and done. You think about it and your mind is blown that anyone could ever think that this was a good idea. The first one I got to talk about is when the MCU blew up, and no one could have predicted that. I remember when first Incredible Hulk came out, the other Hulk didn't really pop. That one was okay. Finally, Iron Man comes out, and then you get the Captain America, and all of a sudden things start building to the Avengers, and you realize the MCU's a thing. Like, people are starting to come in. There's starting to be a lot of interest. As soon as this peak in character interest started happening, Marvel inexplicably just decided to change all of their main characters to new versions of the hero, except for Spider-Man, who wasn't in the MCU. Perch, how much do you think Marvel cost you as a store owner with that ridiculous decision?
I mean, me and everybody else, it was a very baffling decision of why they would go with the all new, all different, let's change everything up. And it felt very, very bizarre. And even when some of the writers would do things like, changing Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver to be not mutants to, in theory, align more with their cinematic universe, it was done in a way that was baffling, confusing to readers, and it seemed like the other writers and editors at Marvel didn't really like it, so they immediately start pushing some other thing. It was very, very strange. How about you, Yul? How much money did they cost you?
My store, I actually did pretty good on some of the books. The one thing I did notice that Jonathan Hickman, when he took over, or when he started Avengers, the Captain America looked a lot like the one in the movie originally.
Yeah. But
he had such an expansive cast, that you weren't always focusing on Captain America. So even then, it wasn't really, even though they were trying to follow the movie, it wasn't really doing that because of so many characters. And then like we've talked about, Iron Man's hot. So, you have Riri Williams. That wasn't necessarily like the best selling book for me, but there was interest, or at least originally.
So it didn't affect you down in Berkeley quite as much as it did some other shops?
I'm not the heaviest in. I'm always curious to see these stores that sell superhero comics in the mass quantities that who can sell 100 She-Hulk or 500 She-Hulk to get this one cover, that kind of thing. And I guess there's a store out there that can do that. Bravo for them. But yeah, I sell some of the other books a lot too.
Just thinking about it, and by the time they decided, obviously we do have all those heroes back, but by the time that they decided to bring Tony Stark back as Iron Man, Bruce Banner as the Hulk, Thor as Thor, and all these characters that were in the MCU back into the fold, there really wasn't a need for it anymore, because by then you had like 3 or 4 MCU movies coming out a year. And also you had a lot of TV programming, you had a lot of cartoons and stuff like that. So they really missed what should have been like the hottest period in recent memory, when their characters were the hottest, to really bring in the new readers. And they just missed that whole window.
It's hard to say. I think the thing about what Yul said, it wasn't like I saw prices drop. They didn't do that. It just, they didn't blow up. And I think that's what a lot of people were expecting. It's the opportunity cost of what could have been if things had gone well, and on both sides, if Disney had started promoting the comics more in the movies, or done some more of these things and kind of connected the dots. And you don't want to have, it doesn't need to be a completely MCU-ified universe. I mean, they changed Nick Fury over to look more like Samuel Jackson, to kind of reconcile with the Ultimate Universe. Well, that's fine that you do that. But that wasn't what people were really looking for when they talk about these books connecting. They were saying, have the Avengers vaguely look and feel like the Avengers in the movie. And so it feels like an opportunity cost that was missed, where you could have made a lot more money. All of us could have made a lot more money if you just would have linked things up a little bit. But it felt like there was almost some, like they deliberately wanted to do the opposite, almost like they were protesting what was going on in the movies.
I'll still never understand that one. Obviously, you've been a lifetime comic book reader. You own your own shop. Is there one decision in the comic book industry that it's still got you scratching your head? You're like, I still don't get why that one happened.
Yeah, there is. As a store owner now, I look back on the Marvel owning their own distribution. Yeah. That's the one that even to this day is still having like profound effects on the industry. If you're just talking about like, you know, events that occur, and like we're saying, you know, that whole aspect of the movie and not taking advantage of what they have going on. If they're making billions of dollars on these, you know, Ant-Man, for God's sake, people actually went and saw that. To me, when I see it solicited in the in previews, I'm thinking, I don't need too many of those books. But people actually went out and saw that, and they couldn't capitalize on that. It's that's one of the things. I also think the fight between DC and Marvel in the last 10 years, 20 years has been pretty problematic also. You know, we don't see a lot of the recollections of the DC Marvel stuff, you know, back in print. And it's just like I don't know, it's like this little infighting that's going on, and it really affects the industry negatively overall.
All right, Perch. So I know you got some opinions on Heroes World, which really was baffling. I'm glad you brought that one up, Yul, because if you looked at what Heroes World was, it was a regional distribution center. Marvel acquired them, did not build out any new infrastructure, but expected them to be distributing nationwide like immediately.
Yeah, that one was bizarre on a lot of choices. I guess Yul said it well. I think the question there is why? Like, what were you trying to accomplish there? I mean, as a larger company, I mean, even at the time with Marvel, with this situation the way it was, I mean, it was not owned by Disney at that point. It had some, you know, problems, and it was overexpanding with everything else. It's still like you go into a strategy hoping to accomplish something. And as a bigger company, you could have very easily just leaned on your distributor of choice and got them to do what you want without wholesale owning them and owning the problem. And that's what Marvel did. It's like they, rather than just use their influence, they're like, let me just bring all this in-house and inherit everything wrong with this thing without bringing in any people who actually know what they're doing with it. I mean, it was a zoo from literally day one. As you know, phones are melting down, like literally melting down. I think the heat of the incoming calls was breaking their systems. And it's like, why did you ever think this was a good idea? What was the business plan where this was going to work out in your favor? I think nobody has ever been able to really answer that.
I think they didn't want to have to cut off profits to the distributor, and they wanted to own it themselves. That way they didn't have to give them their cut.
Sure, but the cost they inherited to run that operation was always, I mean, even you hear people talk about it today, it was always going to be more than what they were saving by keeping that cut. Your cost was always going to be more. And it's very strange. It's like people who did not know math were making this decision.
You know, that's kind of how it feels with the new distributors also. Why would a company or why would a comic store still stick with Diamond? You know, and it's kind of because, well, you know, I'm not good at math and things are okay. So it's better to do that than to just go with another distributor, to start a new distributor like Marvel did, or buy them out. And that's why you stick with what you know. That rut is really comfortable. You know, that worn spot in the couch that you always sit in. Yeah. That's what Diamond is. And for Marvel, in their way, if they would have realized it would have been better overall for the industry, because then capital maybe, you know, doesn't leave, and all the other smaller distributors.
It's weird to see these decisions play out, and in many cases, it always makes me wonder if some of the people involved are just kind of allergic to making money, and they view that making money as a bad thing. Like they just, you know, that if they make money, if they're successful in business, it's somehow shameful. It's not living up to your potential as an artist. That's always how these things play out to me. It's like you're actively steering away from cash. Weird. So
speaking of, you know, not wanting to make money, you made another great one. The weird rivalry. You know, there should be a rivalry between DC and Marvel. like they should want to do better. You know, when you look at like the NBA, that their rivalries there, but they're working together, you know, to make the most money. You know, when DC and Marvel have done the crossover, especially the DC versus Marvel, the amalgam, you know, universe. I think the first one they did was actually like Wizard of Oz or something like that. But there's a lot of money they left on the table by not working together, maybe doing talent exchanges, maybe even doing character exchanges, or doing these big, you know, maybe once every 5 years, do a big DC versus Marvel event series. That is just money laying on the table for retailers and for creators and for Marvel and DC themselves.
They've even had people that, you know, sorry, everybody. Back when Bendis was doing Daredevil, you know, he wanted to do Daredevil and Batman. And that would have probably been pretty good. At that time, you know, he was pretty much at the height of his powers. And those are two popular characters, and it makes sense to put them together. And then, you know, Joe Quesada and Didio have a problem with each other, and it just is never going to happen, even though you have your number one guy in your company, for better or worse. Bendis was their number one guy, and he was saying, we should do this. And they don't even consider it, really.
They always make these contracts. I mean, part of the reason why we haven't seen the reprints and the collections is that these contracts feel like they're so poorly written that it's unclear like who gets the money and how it's divided up. And so you have these big kind of corporations who it's just too much hassle for them to want to deal with to actually make the money. And that sounds absurd when you think about the amount of companies. You mentioned the NBA. There's lots of different entities that do, you know, co-work and co-branding and all kinds of stuff. I mean, this is very common in the industry. Movie studios do it all the time. And the fact that in comics, there's such poorly written business terms and contracts that you can't even maximize something that is, like you said, free money sitting on the table. That's just nuts. It just really speaks to, you know, do these people want to make money?
Well, Marvel has always had a problem wanting to give, because, you know, once you go to reprint, royalties have to get paid out, or trade paperbacks. And Marvel, for some reason, hates doing that for people. That's why a Frank Miller Daredevil will go out of print for a while, or you can't get one of those Brubaker ones. Yep. I guess they just don't want to print any new ones and give him any money. Probably why he signed an exclusive with Image.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that was going to be mine. I think Marvel's approach to paying talent and being, at some point, being very aggressive in not wanting to share the money with your creators is easily, I think, one of the biggest long-term mistakes that's been made, because they isolate creators. They send them, you know, willingly off to other companies, and they just get a reputation of not being a place you want to wind up. When you're the leader with, they have the most recognizable properties now, thanks to the MCU. I mean, you could argue Batman and Superman, but still, that's a powerhouse. And they are the number one in the industry, making the majority of the money. Why you wouldn't want to be super greedy with the creators and just not let them go anywhere, and make sure that the business terms are structured in such a way that they're getting enough to where they won't want to leave. I mean, they have the power to do it. Smaller companies don't. They have to write contracts the way they do because they can't afford more. Marvel can. It's money, it's money being left on the table.
So you would say like Marvel not appreciating their creative talent and realizing that maybe the creative talent can elevate the character rather than the character elevating the creative talent is a problem?
Yeah, and it's a long term. You saw it with when the guys left for Image back in the early 90s. It's the same thing. It's almost 30 years later, and it's the same culture, same behavior that drive, you know, think about it from a company perspective. They spend a lot of money actually and time, in many cases, building up some of these creators. They give them really big talent. They give them a promotion. They put them in comics. They build these names up. And the second that a creator has the ability to go somewhere else, they do, because the payment structure and everything else is so poor. They'll go to Image, they'll go to DC, they'll go anywhere else because it's not good for them. And I think that's a terrible mistake for the industry.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we have lower quality stories, in my opinion. And there are great comics right now, is because it's not worth it. The pay isn't there. I mean, I remember listening to your conversation with Brian Edward Hill. You know, when he was talking about the pay difference, he's like,
yeah,
you have to really love comics to be here, because I could be making a ton more money just writing scripts, you know, in screenplays.
Yeah, you know, the one thing about writing a script for like TV and movie as opposed to a comic book, you might actually be able to get your words printed in the comic book.
That's true.
So that's an aspect that you might, again, depending if you want to be an artist or care about money and all that other stuff that goes with it. If you actually want to get your, you know, just be able to tell your story, working in comics a lot of times is probably more preferable. And especially since so many comics are then getting adapted or put on screen, you know, you can actually get your original words put onto TV after you do it as a comic book because, you know, they already saw that it worked in one way and maybe they won't want to change it so much. Of course, superhero movies or TV, they're always bent in trying to like either unmask the superheroes so that everybody knows who they are, or changing the costumes so that like Taskmaster looks kind of stupid, you know. I mean, personally, I like the skull,
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah.
it doesn't work. You know, people can't wear that as a costume, you know.
You know, you make a really good point. I want to bring this one up. This might actually make people mad. Like when people talk about the death of Vertigo, and it absolutely did happen recently when they did the relaunch with Andy Corey and all the progressive ideology that they crammed in there, and they didn't get good writers. But the original death blow to Vertigo was when DC decided that they didn't want the creators making their own original material to have the rights, you know, for digital and TV and movie going forward. And so they basically said, you can come here. We're DC. You can have Vertigo on your name, or you can go and retain your rights and go to Image or somewhere else. They almost incentivize people not to come work for DC and Marvel because you won't make the money on the stories that you created to begin with.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think Vertigo, if you look at a lot of the Image titles that launched over the last 12 years or so, they're Vertigo titles. They should be, or they would have been in a different world back in the, you know, a decade ago, they would have been. But now, you know, what is your incentive? I mean, honestly, and if your pitch for Vertigo is, hey, top creators, we want you to tell stories that you create, you curate. By the way, we're going to keep all the rights and the money. I mean, that's a terrible deal. Who would, you know, if you're established in the industry, there's no one who takes that deal. And that's just, it drove people to Image. It helped Image. I mean, you could say it was a good thing for the industry because it strengthened Image in that process, even though it killed Vertigo.
Dude, Wicked and Divine is such a Vertigo book.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They would have had like, you know, 60 issues, just like Preacher and Sandman and all that other stuff. I figure it's Neil Gaiman that, you know, they looked at how much they pay him.
Yeah, it's the Gaiman effect. Once DC saw how much money he was making, you know, with his books and then optioning off TV rights and movie rights and stuff like that for stuff that never even got made, actually, they're like, that was our money. You know, we're the one that published it. It's like, that wasn't even your story. That was all his idea. Like, those weren't your characters.
This is one of the situations where making money is not really the most important thing. Like, they're looking at how much money, I'm assuming they're looking at how much money Gaiman makes. They're not looking how much money they're making. You know, they're like, oh, we're paying this out, and they get a burr in their ass about that. And they're like, we can't do this anymore. Marvel's like, we can't let these people get important so that they'll move on anymore. We can't pay them anything, or else they'll have FU money to go do to go do the thing they really want to do. And
it's baffling. Yeah. As a comic company, I think you should, if you're running that company, you should be really proud when you're making millionaires. You should be really, really proud. And to the point, Mark Millar makes people millionaires that he works with. And so that's why people sign up to work with him again. And they will, regardless of whatever else is going on with Millar, they will do that. And if you're, you know, Joe Quesada, you're somebody, Dan Didio, whatever your role is within Marvel or DC, I guess not Didio anymore, you should be really proud of making people rich. That's a sign that your company's successful. You've got loyalty, you've got readers coming in. And so every time you make a millionaire, you should be proud and just keep trying to make more.
Sure thing. I mean, like, think of the person that is, you know, prospective comic book illustrator or writer or whatever. And they say, wow, the whole team is making a lot of money. I want to do that too. You know, that'd be great. and this is something to aspire to. But all you ever hear is comics are going to kill you, kid, or all that stuff. You know, don't go into comics if you want to make any money. You know, that's what it's always been. Even as a store owner, people that are creating them, publishing them, you know, distributing, obviously. Who would want to be a distributor? Seriously. I would not want to ground up be one.
I think we had a really good discussion. We didn't really plan any of this out. I knew we were going to talk about, you know, what Marvel did at the beginning when the MCU blew up and just changing all the heroes. But I think we got some really good stupid decisions from DC, from Marvel, from the entire industry that really left a lot of money on the table and probably shrunk the industry. Thank you guys so much for joining me. The first time we've had Perch and Yule on the channel, just the three of us, and I think it went really well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Always happy to be on with both of you.